The 2026 World Cup was meant to be a once-in-a-generation celebration. The first time three nations, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, would host the world's biggest sporting event together. For a while, the dream felt real. Cities raced to build new stadiums, fans booked flights years in advance, and politicians spoke about unity and pride. But somewhere along the way, excitement gave way to doubt. Headlines began to change. Stories of planning delays, political tension, and growing unease started replacing the optimism that once defined this project. Then came a single sentence that sent shockwaves across the world. At a packed press conference in Washington, Donald Trump looked into the cameras and said, "If I see a place that isn't safe, we'll move the match somewhere else." What was meant as confidence sounded like chaos. Within hours, FIFA officials were scrambling, sponsors were nervous, and global headlines questioned whether America could still deliver on its promise. The tournament that was supposed to bring people together was suddenly testing the strength of North American cooperation and revealing how fragile America's global image had become just months before kickoff. When the 2026 World Cup was first announced in 2018, it felt like a moment of hope. The United States, Canada, and Mexico stood together on stage, promising the world a tournament built on cooperation, innovation, and shared pride. It was a historic decision, the first time three nations would co-host football's greatest event. Leaders celebrated the victory as proof that North America could unite for something larger than politics. Back then, the US was viewed as the driving force, with unmatched infrastructure, financial power, and global influence. Trump, then in office, had even assured FIFA that all players, fans, and officials would be treated with fairness and respect. The world believed him. But 7 years later, that optimism is fading. The same country that once symbolized stability now struggles with deep political division, social unrest, and growing mistrust abroad. International outlets have begun questioning whether the US can still deliver on its promise. Reports of planning delays, visa complications, and concerns about safety have added pressure. More than 500 mass shootings recorded in a single year have shaken global confidence. For many fans overseas, the image of America as a reliable, welcoming host is starting to crumble. As doubts rise, the unity that once defined this shared dream feels fragile, setting the stage for the moment when politics and sport would collide. It happened in September 2025, inside a crowded briefing room in Washington, where dozens of reporters gathered for what was supposed to be a routine press conference. Cameras flashed as Donald Trump walked to the podium, smiling confidently, as if ready to take control of the narrative once again. But what he said next would change the tone of the entire World Cup conversation. "If I see a place that isn't safe," he declared, "we'll move the match somewhere else." The statement echoed across the world in minutes. Sports networks cut live, headlines exploded, and social media lit up. To his supporters, it sounded like decisive leadership. To everyone else, especially abroad, it sounded like chaos. The World Cup isn't a political campaign or a national project. It's a shared event that represents global unity, trust, and coordination across borders. With one line, Trump blurred that boundary, making an international tournament sound like a domestic security briefing. Inside FIFA, officials were caught off guard. An emergency meeting was called within 48 hours. Vice President Victor Montagliani, who oversees North and Central America, delivered a calm but pointed reminder to reporters afterward. Football is bigger than any country, bigger than any government or slogan. It was a rare public pushback, and it sent a clear message. No nation, not even the United States, could dictate the world's game. Behind closed doors, sponsors demanded clarity, and local organizers scrambled to respond. Could the host nation really threaten to move matches after years of planning? Billions of dollars, infrastructure deals, and international travel schedules depended on stability. Even if no games would actually be moved, the damage was already done. The issue wasn't about logistics anymore. It was about perception and whether the world still trusted America to keep the World Cup above politics. The aftermath of Trump's statement was immediate. Within days, organizers across North America were fielding frantic calls from sponsors, investors, and local officials. What was supposed to be a confident show of leadership had turned into confusion. The idea of relocating even one match sounded impossible. The logistics of the 2026 World Cup had been finalized years earlier, with 16 host cities locked in and billions already invested in construction, security, and tourism planning. But the problem wasn't about moving matches, it was about trust. Trump's decision to name specific U.S. cities as unsafe, including Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Chicago, deepened the crisis. Each of those cities wasn't just hosting matches, they were economic anchors for the entire tournament. Los Angeles alone was expected to bring in over $1 billion in tourism revenue. Sponsors tied to those cities began requesting reassurance from FIFA and city governments. Local officials held emergency meetings, worried about reputational damage and canceled deals. Inside FIFA, senior figures debated how to respond without provoking a political fight. Behind the scenes, contingency discussions quietly resurfaced, not to replace U.S. venues, but to prepare for the growing perception that America's internal politics could disrupt the event. The organization's leadership, aware of the mounting global attention, leaned on diplomatic language to calm tensions. Yet the international press had already seized the story. Headlines across Europe and Asia questioned whether the U.S. could still act as a stable host. Opinion pieces described the upcoming tournament as politically volatile and too Americanized. Within the country, Trump's supporters saw his comments as patriotic, while critics accused him of turning the world's most inclusive event into a stage for political theater. The controversy had crossed borders. And for FIFA, the World Cup's spotlight had become a reflection of America's growing division. As the headlines spread, the world began to look at America differently. What once was viewed as the most reliable host for a global event now seemed unpredictable and divided. Major newspapers in Europe, Asia, and South America ran stories questioning whether the United States could still represent the unity that the World Cup stood for. The concerns weren't only about politics. They were about how difficult the country had become to access and understand. Reports highlighted that over 500 mass shootings had taken place in a single year, raising fears about safety. Videos of protests, police clashes, and political rallies dominated international news feeds. For millions of football fans abroad, the U.S. no longer looked like the easy, modern, and open destination it once promised to be. The biggest frustration, however, came from the visa process. Russia in 2018 and Qatar in 2022 had offered smooth, streamlined entry. Fans only needed a ticket and a passport. The U.S. system, by contrast, required interviews, proof of income, and months of waiting. One journalist summed it up simply: in Russia, you needed a ticket and a passport. In the U.S., you need time, money, and a miracle. That line went viral across social media and sports blogs, amplifying criticism that America had become too complicated for a tournament built on accessibility. FIFA officials quietly acknowledged that the process was hurting fan enthusiasm. Each new delay, each report of denied visas, chipped away at the image of efficiency that once defined the United States. What was meant to be a global celebration now felt burdened by bureaucracy and fear, as the world began turning its attention toward America's quieter, steadier neighbors. While the United States wrestled with controversy and headlines, its neighbors to the north and south quietly pushed forward. Canada and Mexico were not caught in political storms or public disputes. Their focus was simple: preparation, organization, and delivery. Construction at key stadiums in Toronto, Vancouver, and Guadalajara was running ahead of schedule. In Canada, officials proudly announced that fan zones were expanding to include dozens of community spaces designed to welcome both locals and travelers. Mexico, meanwhile, had completed major transport and security upgrades months early, earning praise from international inspectors. Sponsors began to notice the difference. Companies that once planned their biggest marketing campaigns around U.S. venues started redirecting funds toward Canada and Mexico, viewing them as safer and more predictable partners. The shift wasn't loud, but it was steady. Both governments maintained clear communication with FIFA, avoiding political distractions and keeping every deadline intact. This calm professionalism contrasted sharply with the uncertainty surrounding American cities. International media outlets praised Canada and Mexico for their reliability, calling them pillars of composure in a turbulent regional project. What began as a shared North American triumph was slowly turning into a quiet rebalancing of trust. And as global confidence in the US faded, the spotlight was beginning to move north and south of its borders. Behind the scenes, FIFA found itself walking a dangerous line. The organization had to protect its independence while working closely with the same governments that could threaten it. Trump's growing involvement made that balance harder than ever. His public claim that he could call FIFA President Gianni Infantino anytime and easily have games moved raised eyebrows inside the organization. The two men had appeared together at several global events, including peace forums and economic summits, showing a personal connection that many inside FIFA viewed as too close for comfort. Vice President Victor Montagliani, who oversees North and Central America, spoke publicly in London to remind everyone of the game's true hierarchy. "Football will always outlast politics," he said. "Presidents come and go, but the game remains." His words reflected quiet frustration within FIFA's leadership, which feared that political interference could undermine years of careful planning. Despite the tension, FIFA's internal reports told a calmer story. Stadium construction and transport systems were on track, and there were no confirmed safety concerns across the 16 host cities. Yet perception mattered more than progress. Each new statement from Washington could unsettle sponsors, fans, and partners around the world. For FIFA, the challenge had shifted, from organizing matches to protecting trust in the world's most unifying event. Every World Cup reveals more than sport. It reflects the host's values, stability, and place in the world. For North America, 2026 was meant to symbolize unity, but it now feels like a test of credibility and cooperation. The world will be watching not only the games, but whether the United States can still live up to its promise. So what do you think? Can America restore confidence before kickoff? Tell me what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.